Welcome to the Kolbe Cast, episode 128. Thank you for joining us. Today we take you on a virtual college visit of Kolbe college partner, the Collegium, in Hagerstown, Maryland. Dean of Students William Stover joins us to discuss the college's community, curriculum, and spiritual life, along with watchmaking and pretzels. We hope that you'll enjoy the show.
Hi there, I'm Bonnie, liturgical musician, popcorn and podcast fanatic, and Kolbe homeschooling mom to 4 lads and lasses of middle and high school age.
And this is Stephen, homeschooling father of 5 and director of development for Kolbe Academy.
Hi, Stephen. How are you today?
Doing well. How are you, Bonnie?
I'm doing all right. Thank you. I'm looking forward to our conversation today. We're making a virtual college visit to the Collegium in Hagerstown, Maryland, an up-and-coming college grounded in the tradition of the church, focused on sacred liturgy, and built upon an innovative model. Here now to tell us about it is Mr. William Stover, who serves as the Collegium's Dean of Men and Director of Admissions, and as a faculty member. Hello, and welcome to the Kolbe Cast.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to be part of this conversation today.
Oh, we're delighted to meet you and to converse with you. I've seen a couple of things on the Collegium. I'm really interested to find out more about it. First, though, your CV has several interesting ologies and areas of expertise. What first piqued your interest in the peoples of the ancient world and their languages, customs, and history keeping?
Well, see, as much as I wish there was some great sort of ideological reason that I could give here, I really just sort of ended up where I am because my older brother was an academic, and he started making me learn Greek when I was 8. And so it just seemed like a sort of natural progression that I was going to just continue to read Greek and Latin and history and things. And then so when I got to college, it just seemed natural that that's what I was going to keep doing, and sort of never saw a good reason to stop.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I was going to ask you what the progression from your early interest in these topics to graduate level academic studies looked like, and there it is. So that's interesting. So how did you then come to be involved with the Collegium?
That is also a rather funny story. So I was working on my PhD at the time at the University of Virginia, and I was then, as now, somewhat concerned about the trajectory of modern academia, shall we say. There were a lot of problems that I didn't see getting better and seemed to have the potential to get much worse. I really loved a lot of what I did. I loved my teaching, especially. I loved doing research, but the sort of cost of admission in terms of the atmosphere I had to be in at a large modern university was starting to look like a price that was a little bit too much to pay. And then when COVID came on the horizon, I knew it was going to be a massive upheaval in the university system. And as somebody who's been subjected to online teaching, both as an instructor and as a student, I am keenly aware of the drawbacks of that model. And so guessing, as was correct, that people were going to be stuck with online teaching for a long time, I took leave of my PhD program and decided I was going to, figure out what I was going to do when I grow up. So I was sort of bouncing around central Pennsylvania, fixing tractors and stuff. That's my other hobby, is I'm an auto mechanic.
Okay.
And just kind of trying to figure out what to do with my life when I think my mom first mentioned she'd seen something about the Collegium getting started. And at that point, I had no desire to hear anything to do with higher education. So I just, completely ignored whatever she sent me. Never thought about it a second time. And went on that way for over a year until a good friend of mine got in touch with me because she had interviewed and been offered, my current job here, and had accepted, and then had found out that she and her husband were expecting, and their due date was the first week of classes.
Oh.
And she thought that would be a little bit difficult to juggle, first week of classes of a new institution with a newborn infant. And so she harassed me until I agreed to talk to Dr. Schaefer, who she had interviewed with and gotten the job from. So I sent him an email and then had a phone call with him, and then drove down to Hagerstown to meet with him. And yeah, before too long, in fact, I think in the space of less than a week, I was I'd been offered a full-time position here. And yeah, it's sort of that's how it all started. And yeah, I'm still here, still trucking away.
Wow. Okay. That was meant to be, wasn't it? How it all came together.
Yeah.
So, when you meet folks who haven't yet heard about the Collegium, how would you describe it to them?
Well, usually I just try to lay out just the skeleton framework. It is a small, which at least to me, that's a good thing. Very newly opened liberal arts program grounded in the Catholic tradition that seeks to provide a place for families of a strong Catholic background, particularly those from the homeschooling community, of which, in case you couldn't have guessed, I was myself homeschooled.
Oh, okay.
That comes through a lot, I feel like, especially once I started talking about learning Greek when I was 8. Yeah, a place for families, particularly those from the homeschooling community, can feel confident in sending their children to receive not only a education, but also a formation along the way to adulthood. Because at a certain point, you need to start living away from the home. You need to get some experience, having some of your own responsibilities and having to keep your own schedule and things. And so we're trying to provide a place that parents can trust that their children will be in an environment that is wholly and integrally Catholic while they receive a good education, and also start to work out that process of transition from being a kid into being a functioning, well-formed Catholic adult.
Great. Okay. I'm going to come back and ask you for some more specifics on that here in a little bit. Our listeners may have caught the recent webinar by Dr. Edward Schaefer, whom you've mentioned. He's the founder of the Collegium. Or they may have seen Dr. Schaefer at last year's virtual college fair that Kolbe hosted. In case not, we'll have links to those in our show notes. In those presentations, we heard about the unique way the school is set up to house, feed, and form students. The juxtaposition of that with the commitment to tradition and the unique curriculum is really interesting to me. Could you take us through some of the aspects of the school's setup that tends to the temporal needs of the students and the community that you're forming?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad you sort of used the trigger word there of community, because that is sort of my particular area of responsibility as dean, is sort of making sure that the community side of things is functioning as it should. And so we all live here in the same building. This is currently broadcasting from what is a renovated hotel right in downtown Hagerstown that's been turned into apartments and other use spaces. So we all live together. There's a men's wing and a women's wing. And then, I actually live in the stairwell because as the dean of students, any student has to be able to come knock on my door. And so I can't live over in the men's wing, or else women couldn't, if there was an emergency, they couldn't come knock on my door. So there's one apartment that's right off the stairwell, which is where I live.
Okay.
And so we really strive to integrate the spiritual, academic, and social activities of the students to sort of build upon one another. So we live together, we see each other all the time. We eat our meals together. We have quite a few activities and trips we try doing together that combine both an educational element with just, it's nice to go see something cool. I love museums, or we had a trip to Antietam Battlefield recently. So we try to provide opportunities for the students to do things together that are both educational but also fun. And that is one advantage of having a small institution, is that it's relatively easy to plan the logistics on that sort of thing. We eat all our meals together. There are a few days, like Sunday nights, the students voted that nobody wanted to all come together for a meal Sunday night. So Sunday nights are the nights people eat leftovers usually.
Okay.
But in general, we eat all our meals together in community, just like sort of a Benedictine monastery. But we do get to talk during meals, so we don't have to sit in silence while the reader reads. We obviously have the office. We have lauds in the morning and vespers in the evening in community, just up the block at St. Mary's Church, which is a beautiful old Catholic church here in Hagerstown. So what we're really sort of trying to do is to bring the students together, not just for class and then never really interact with each other outside of that. What we really want to do is we want the students to learn how to live in community with other people who come from different backgrounds and different places and get along with each other, learn how to take initiative and plan things with each other, which is something I've been really impressed with this year, that the students have taken a lot of initiative in putting together a plan of like, we were talking, this is a thing we would like to do, can you help us facilitate that? And I'm more than happy to do that. So it's all part of the process of getting these students growing in confidence and sort of growing in maturity and learning how to take initiative on things, how to work with other people, and how to, sort of continue on that process of becoming adults.
This is connecting for me a little bit. When you started talking about how you're kind of seeing a lot of modern academia doesn't really work completely well, and looking at the Collegium and seeing how innovative you seem to be there, as far as, like the community that you're talking about, which of course you can't do in a huge university, but low tuition that I saw on your website there, and some of the different work experiences that you're offering, or the volunteer experiences that your students have as well. So what was the vision that brought about this kind of different model than what you typically see?
I'd say there's sort of two answers to that question. On the one side of things, one of our sort of driving desires in the creation of this institution is to keep it affordable, because I'm sure I don't need to tell you guys the just absolute crisis that is educational cost in this country. It's just absolutely unhinged, and we know that it's something parents worry a lot about, particularly parents who do have large Catholic families. It can be a major sort of dark cloud looming on the horizon of how we going to pay for education for our children. And so keeping the cost as low as we possibly can has been a sort of a guiding principle from day one. And so part of that is that we're still planning on staying small, because there's a sort of administrative costs don't rise equally with size. There's a certain point you reach where they start to really outpace the size in terms of their proportion. And so we're planning on staying under that threshold. And then with things like the work program, not only does that bring in some money to help offset the tuition, but it also serves the purpose of getting the students out there involved in all sorts of different settings, office settings, or depending on what kind of work they do in the work program. It gives them some experience working out in the world, and experience that could be really valuable for them depending on what they choose to do after college. Because I know, just thinking of my own experience, having spent at this point far too long in universities, I saw a lot of people who graduated college and had never really matured in the slightest. They had no idea how you went into a workplace, how you sort of collaborated or cooperated with people you just worked with. They really had never learned how you do these things, which are pretty important parts of being an adult. And so that's another sort of reason for the way we've structured it with the work program, is it gives students a sort of safe and controlled introduction into that professional life in the outside world. And in some cases, it can do really well. So one of our students, unfortunately, due to some changing family circumstances, had to drop out, but he actually is now working full time for the company that he had done his work program with while he was a student, because he'd really liked the work. He'd found that he was very comfortable and did really well in the office setting he was in, and he's now working full time for them. And so that's a great, obviously it would have been nice if he hadn't had to drop out to work full time and could have finished first, but that's a very good outcome to see, that a student is able to then parlay that experience they get with our work program into an actual full-time career.
I saw that there's even opportunities for watch building there, which might
Yes, Hagerstown has a watchmaking school and workshop that does they do the warranty repairs for a bunch of major watch companies right here in Hagerstown. And so yeah, we do have students who are learning watchmaking and working in the watchmaking repair center, which I'm honestly a little bit jealous of because, as somebody who likes moving parts and gears and things, that sounds awesome.
It's right up your alley. Well, they really are doing all sorts of stuff in the community. It's really intriguing to me how they're doing all sorts of different types of work, and it's the opposite of being really insulated on a campus, never stepping foot off the campus to see what life is like on the outside, so to speak. That really is fantastic that it gives them that opportunity and experience.
And I think it's important that students are able to have that in a safe and sort of controlled way, because on the one hand, they are, students are still, they're still kids, and they should have a sort of safe home environment type thing at school that they can, withdraw to when they want to. But you don't want them just in a bubble, like you said. You do want them sort of starting to reach out beyond that home environment and learning how to work and operate outside of it. Because, like, I know for me, the only reason I ever left my college campus was to go to the good Chick-fil-A, which was off campus. The one on campus, not good. and so I think it's important that students are given the opportunity in a sort of gentle way to start to expose themselves to the broader world and learn about how you operate in a career setting, in an office setting, or in a watchmaking setting, depending as the case may be.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear more about your curriculum too, as well, and kind of I know I saw some great music stuff in there as well, and along with some books I recognized about Holy Scripture and things. But yeah, what are some of the highlights of your curriculum so far?
Well, the real highlight will be once I finally succeed in my coup and get Greek added to the curriculum. But that hasn't happened yet. That hasn't happened yet. But stay tuned. Stay tuned. So our curriculum follows the very traditional elements laid out over the past 1,500 years of the sort of Western liberal education. So it starts out with the trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, the sort of elements you need to learn how to do anything else. You have to, because if you can't sort of deduce ideas and analyze ideas and talk about them, it's really hard to then learn any sort of more advanced subject. If you don't know how to evaluate an idea for its truth or its falsity, it's really hard to move on to advanced topics. So the students start out with the trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, alongside the more I suppose you would say explicitly Catholic parts of the curriculum, which would be our sequence in the Old and New Testament and Catholic and sort of the Catholic way of studying and interpreting the Old and New Testament. Then there's a sequence in the humanities, so starting from the culture of ancient Greece, moving all the way up to modern culture. And in those courses, which I'm in charge of, I try to sort of strike a balance between just reading literature and just talking about the history, because I think both of those are important, because there are courses where you never actually read any primary sources, and I think that's a problem. You never sort of get to see how the people you're talking about in history really thought or felt or expressed themselves. I think that's a deficit. On the other hand, I've seen courses where all they do is read primary literature, and so they may be really familiar with specific works of literature, but they have no idea the historical context or the historical forces that gave rise to that moment in history. So I try to strike a balance there and guide the students through not only the events of history and the trajectory, the currents through history, how one thing is led into another to lead up to, well, right now we're doing Rome, so we're kind of leading up to the establishment of the church, but also give them insight into specifically the real personalities of people in the ancient world, so that they can sort of understand the workings of providence in history and how specific people did specific things that they might not have understood at the time, but which have ultimately been brought together for good to lead to the triumph of Christianity in the West. And then in addition, let's see, music history. That's a big one, since of course the musical tradition of the church has always been such an important and vibrant part of our ecclesiastical life as Catholics and our worship, that's something we think students should have a solid grounding and appreciation for. Even as lay people, they should understand how music has been so influential in shaping the liturgy and in shaping the way the church has performed its work. Then let's see, we have Latin, which I do the upper level Latin courses. So right now we just finished up some St. Jerome, and we're about to do some Augustine, and we're going to compare the way that those two fathers thought about reading pagan literature. Since then, over in my Rome course, that's exactly what we're doing. So we're gonna look at what some of the different fathers thought about how Christians should approach those sorts of things. And that takes me on to sort of the big picture of our curriculum, is that we're trying to make everything integrated and connected, rather than sort of a bunch of individual boxes that each topic goes into and there's walls between them. Wherever we can, we like to draw them together into conversation with each other. And sometimes that's obviously easier than other times, like Latin and the church music side of things. Those are very, very easy to sort of draw a lot of connections to. And then Latin and, say, my current Roman civilization course is pretty easy. But we try to utilize the things they're learning in, say, logic and grammar when we talk about the ideas and the texts in the ancient history courses. And we try to get them to start making these connections on their own, in taking the different parts of the curriculum and bringing them together.
With a small group there, is it a one set curriculum where you're guiding students through all these?
Yeah, so like St. John's or Thomas Aquinas or one of those. Yeah, it's a set curriculum that all the students do. With the language classes, Latin, we have some leeway. So if a student comes in with a large amount of Latin that would put them well out of their sequence, we're perfectly willing to set up a small independent study seminar with upper level students who've already had sufficient Latin that they can sort of start engaging with things much more seriously and at a higher level. But outside of that, yeah, everyone's sort of on the same track.
Like a perfect area for your Greek, those students who come in already knowing Latin well.
That's right. Yeah. I think Kolbe students would find a lot of, they find that to be somewhat familiar, the way their progression through the high school courses and even the preparation for those earlier years in Kolbe as well. The integration among the subjects, that is very much something that Kolbe strives for as well, in the emphasis on primary sources and placed in context like you're talking about. So it sounds like it would be a continuation of in many respects, of how Kolbe students are accustomed to approaching their academic work. Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think it's definitely a superior way of sort of moving through an educational program, is when things are able to be sort of linked together, not just a lot of disparate topics that don't interact. I was very fortunate when I went to college. I was able to get into a program which exempted me from almost the entire core of gen ed requirements. And so I took pretty much exclusively the classes I wanted to take. And so most semesters I was taking all my classes in the same department, which was nice, because I was not only sort of seeing the same faculty each day and really developing good sort of personal relationships with the faculty, but it was sort of, going from reading Cicero to going into a class on the late Republic. And it was all sort of, they were all close together. And I found that each individual class was really enhanced by the fact that the rest of my classes were in a similar vein.
I'm a Thomas Aquinas College graduate myself, so I'm a fan of that integrated in the one curriculum. And for me, that's the way to do it with liberal arts, because when you're trying to get the student to think for themselves, you don't want to tell them necessarily, you should think this about each of these books, but it seems like it's the role of the teacher to present things in the proper order and to, guide them so that they can come to that knowledge for themselves. So I think that seems to me the perfect way to do it, when you can set up all of those things and the truth is just screaming at them then from every direction. It's wonderful.
Well, you've alluded to it somewhat already, but let's talk a bit about the musical life of the school. I imagine Dr. Schaefer's background in classical and sacred music plays, pardon the pun, sorry, a significant role in that aspect in particular of the Collegium. What else can you tell us about the musical life there?
Well, I will admit that this is sort of my weakness in that I am a profoundly unmusical person.
Okay.
So I don't actively I don't sing in the scola or any of that, which I think everyone should probably be grateful for. Um, yeah, so we do have a scola, which currently at our local parish, St. Mary's, which is the home of the Latin Mass for Western Maryland. We alternate off weeks between our scola and the parish scola. So every other week, our scola does the liturgy there at St. Mary's. We also sing for when we have masses for feast days, and obviously scola and the music history classes are sort of very closely linked in the things they're doing. But yeah, music is definitely something that is taken very very seriously and encouraged. We encourage not just liturgical music, but we also have a number of our students are quite proficient at various instruments, and so we facilitate wherever we can them getting opportunities to advance that. So we've helped students set up lessons with people for their various instruments, because Hagerstown actually has quite a lot of resources in that regard, because we have a symphony orchestra, the only one anywhere in this part of Maryland. There's a lot of musical things going on in this city. We actually have a very beautiful restored downtown theater that hosts musical performances. And so it's brought a lot of musicians to the area. And so we help students access those resources if they so choose, and encourage them to sort of cultivate their musical skills. But yeah, definitely the sort of the crowning thing is definitely the liturgical music, as I think it probably should be. But yeah, that is one thing that I greatly regret that I'm not heavily sort of involved in, simply due to profound and utter lack of musicality.
Well, that was going to be my question. Does one need to be a trained musician to attend the school?
No,
Sounds like
no, we
not.
do not. We have some students who just do not sing and do not
Okay.
do not involve themselves in the scola. But I think most of our students seem at least to have some interest in music. But it is not an entrance requirement, which I'm very happy about, or else I wouldn't be working here.
I'm sure they come away with an appreciation for it, though, whether or not they contribute to it vocally. There's certainly a need for that as well.
Yeah, and of course we our lauds in the morning and vespers in the evening are all sung, and so
Mhm.
they're being exposed to the musical tradition of the church every day.
Nice, nice. So the academic and musical aspects of student and community life are two important parts, as you've been telling us, but the Collegium's focus is on liturgy and spiritual formation. So how would you describe the spiritual life of the Collegium?
Actually, currently I have some very good news to share in that regard. So up to this point, we have been very, very blessed by the generosity of the pastor of our local parish, which is just a block away, who's been helping us out. He's been sort of on an ad hoc basis performing the functions of chaplain for us. But starting next year, we should be having our own chaplain. We had a very gracious meeting with our bishop, who sort of gave us the go ahead to start looking for a chaplain and planning out how that would work. So we should soon have our own priest who will be our chaplain, which will be very good because, we're incredibly grateful for the generosity of time of our local pastor, but he is a busy man with his own parish and school, and so it'll be good to have some extra help for him in that regard. And so there's going to be a lot of sort of, I would say, expansions of the opportunities we have here. So we would like eventually, hopefully next year, we're going to start having daily mass available. Right now we have the Tridentine Mass available on Sundays and on all the feast days, but only on some days, depending on Father's schedule. So we should in the future be having it every day. We're hoping to have expanded times for confession, and God willing, hopefully sort of a school adoration hour every week. We're hoping to put into effect once we have our chaplain set up. So it's very much it's very much a work in progress since we're so new, but good things are happening, and we're very, very blessed to be here in Hagerstown, where there are opportunities already existing for the liturgical life and for the spiritual development of the students. As I said, our local priest has been absolutely wonderful to us. But yeah, in the future, we're going to be sort of taking a little bit more of the reins of that with acquiring a chaplain. I don't know if acquiring is the right word. That sounds like just sort of go pick one up and put them in the trunk, bring them back. but yeah, so we currently have a good situation with regard to the liturgical and spiritual life, but it's a situation that should be getting even better soon once we're able to get that off the ground. Eventually, depending on how the future prognosis and how we grow, we may eventually look into having sort of our own space, our own chapel. But right now, we're welcome to use St. Mary's Church, which, as I said, is just a block away and is a very beautiful old church. I think it was built in the 1820s. And so it's a wonderful liturgical home for us right now. And we're very grateful to have it. In the future, we may look at starting to invest in our own sort of liturgical space. But for the moment, there's just sort of no reason for that. And to sort of harken back to what we were saying before in terms of our interest in keeping the costs down, when something's working well at the moment, we don't want to devote resources to replacing it if it does not yet really need to be replaced.
There's something really beautiful too about that opportunity to be part of the local Catholic community, where there's things they can, I'm sure, bring to support your students, and the students are probably bringing this great new life to the parish, and or additional new life to the parish.
No, absolutely. I feel exactly the same way, and we have students who are doing volunteer work in the parish, and so I think that is actually, like you said, a very powerful opportunity there for the students to sort of be involved and invested in a local parish community, which I think is really important and is something that not everyone was given the opportunity to do in their life.
Definitely. I understand there are several students who were homeschooled among your current students, and you mentioned that earlier also, that you have had homeschooled students in mind as well as you guys were.
Yeah, it is currently the majority.
Okay. You've addressed this in several ways, but I'll go ahead and ask it in case there's something new you want to bring to this. What would a Kolbe student like about the Collegium, and how would the school help a formerly homeschooled student transition to more independent living?
It's certainly a question that could go in a variety of directions, because as a homeschooler myself, as you know, homeschooling is far from a sort of monolithic thing. There's
right.
a lot of shades of variety in how people have gone about it and what their experiences are. And so I'll just sort of answer it from my own perspective, from my own homeschooling background.
Okay.
In my experience, a lot of homeschooling kids are used to a high level of self-direction. They're used to having the opportunity to sort of take their own initiative on things and plan out things that they want to do and pursuing their own sort of interests and goals. And I think that this is a great environment for that, because while our curriculum is very set and, follows that traditional model of the Western liberal arts, the rest of our sort of community life, as I said, really encourages a lot of initiative on the part of the students and a lot of planning of what they want to do and what their interests are, rather than simply sort of telling them, this is what your activities look like. We encourage them to go out and find things that they're interested in, and then we do our best to facilitate them pursuing those interests on their own. And the same thing applies to our work program. We give students a lot of input in the types of jobs available at the work program. We do the sort of preference sheets where people put down, their first and second and third preference. And so not everyone gets, their first choice, but everyone gets something, something they had, something that they'd expressed an interest in and are interested in, potentially pursuing further on. And in addition to that, here in this, the Hamilton Hotel, the renovated hotel we live in, these are very much not sort of standard dorms. As somebody who lived in standard dorms, I'm very grateful for that fact. These really are sort of full apartments, and so they have kitchens. And so we encourage students that, certainly we love to see everyone at meals and that community time, but this is also a good opportunity for students to learn a little bit about, living on their own. And so sometimes the students will, 2 or 3 students will get together and decide they're going to cook something, or they're going to bake, they're going to have some sort of some sort of social thing on their own. And that's great. That's the type of thing that we like to see. We like to see the students taking initiative in planning out their own activities and interests with each other, rather than simply relying on a sort of a program that's handed down from above. Because once you reach adulthood, there's very, very infrequently a sort of comprehensive program of this is what your day looks like. You're sort of responsible for going out and planning how you're going to manage your time. And so we encourage the students to think a lot about that, think how they're spending their time, how they're prioritizing, homework and their work programs. And if they are interested, we encourage students to work more hours than they're required to. They're required to work 8 hours, 1 shift a week at their work programs. But some students really like the job and work out with the employer to actually work more hours to start earning some money, which we think that's great. That's a good example of the sort of initiative and the transition to adulthood that we like to see among our students. And so for me, coming from the homeschooling background, I was really self-directed. Like I had my own business while I was homeschooled. When I was 15, I made traditional German baked goods and sold them at farmers markets.
That sounds good.
And so, yeah, so at least looking at my own experience, this is the type of place where we really encourage that kind of initiative of students going out and deciding how they want to spend their time. And as long as they're accomplishing what they need to do and, being attentive to their studies and their commitments, we really encourage them to sort of go out and explore how they want to spend their time and how they want to pursue their interests. And so I think for a lot of homeschoolers who are used to a sort of level of self-direction and responsibility, this is a really good opportunity for them to sort of open and broaden out the realm within which they can exercise that responsibility as they grow up and mature.
Sure seems like an incremental approach from their home to this setup that has so many similar structure and the community aspect and the family dining style and so many aspects of that, but rather than sort of just a full-on release and here you go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So we want to be here as a sort of home and support system for the students, but we don't want the students to just be in their apartments all day. We want them to be out learning and experiencing and doing.
It sounds like Hagerstown is a very walkable area where you guys, all the locations that you utilize for your various things are within close walking distance, right?
Yeah. So we have the Hamilton Hotel here, which is our home base and where we live. And then just 1 block away is St. Mary's Church. And like a half a block away is the University of Maryland at Hagerstown, where we lease all our academic space from.
Okay.
Which is a very up-to-date, modern academic building. So our classrooms are state of the art. We have the smart boards and everything, which as like a blackboard and chalk kind of guy, I'm still getting used to like the very, very high level of classroom technology. But yeah, it's all very, very compact right within the center of downtown Hagerstown.
Nice. We have spoken about several aspects of the day-to-day life for the students. Is there a typical day in the life that you could describe for them?
So we our classes start at 8:10 in the morning. Before I get there, so our class schedule works on a Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday cycle. So there are no classes on Wednesdays. So on Wednesdays, a lot of students choose to do their whole weekly work requirement on Wednesday, but they don't have to. We leave it up to the student and the employer to work out how they want to do that. So many students choose to just do Wednesday, do all 8 hours. Others will do a few hours every afternoon throughout the week, and that's perfectly fine. We leave that up to their own planning. But on the non-Wednesday days, classes start at 8 or 8:10 actually. And then following that is Lauds over at St. Mary's. And then there's another class, and then lunch, and then another class. And so generally the day wraps up at about 2:15. On some days there's Scola practice after that. And I think on one day there's another class after that, maybe 2 days. I don't teach that last one, so it's out of sight, out of mind for me.
Sure.
I know that my teaching day finishes at 2:15.
Okay, fair enough.
Ben, so we try to leave a big sort of space in the middle of the day for students to either do their work programs if they're interested, or just a time that if they want to walk over to City Park, they could do that, or if they want to go to the grocery store, run errands or whatever. We like to leave a big sort of big space in the afternoon for students to do things that they might need to do, or just start on the homework. I know I certainly never would have started on my homework at 2 p.m. in college, but maybe some people are more responsible than I was. Who can say? And then at 5:15, we all gather for the rosary and vespers, and then immediately following that is dinner, and then that sort of wraps up the schedule for the day. Some evenings we'll have some sort of group activity we'd facilitated. So on a Monday night, we drove outside of town, and somebody loaned us a telescope so we could look at the Jupiter at its closest point to Earth. And so, yeah, everyone piled into some cars and we drove outside of town after dinner on Monday. So sometimes there'll be some sort of optional activity we put together, or sometimes the students will have something they've put together. They're all watching a movie, or nice. Doing a ping pong tournament or something like that. But generally, yeah, the day sort of ends after dinner, and students are then free to their own devices, which usually seems to involve homework.
Yeah, that sounds like a nice day. So as we are wrapping up, is there anything that we haven't yet talked about that you wanted to?
Let's see. We talked about the work program, which for me anyways, is a really sort of unique and important part of the experience here. Nothing especially is coming to mind. We talked about the curriculum and the student life, which on the note of activities, I do sometimes sort of break out my old long dormant skills and do like traditional German baked good nights with the students. A couple weeks ago, I made a bunch of traditional Bavarian pretzels, and my fiance actually drove down here, and we had a sort of little open house in my stairwell apartment, and the local priest from the church came over, and it was nice to just have the students get to sort of spend time in a more relaxed setting, both with their pastor as well as with some of the faculty.
That sounds wonderful.
Eating pretzels, which makes everything better.
Definitely. Yes. Homemade ones. Wow. What a treat. So if families listening have students who are interested in finding out more about checking out the school, what's the best way for them to accomplish that?
Well, I think the best thing you can do is, if you are interested, is try to come out for a visit. We're very happy to have visitors. We've already had several this school year so far, and depending on where you're located, that can be a multi-day thing. We've had students stay for as long as I think 3 days, and they stay in one of the apartments with other students, and they really get sort of the full experience of going to the classes and prayer and meals, and really seeing what the days actually look like. And that sort of, I think, is the best exposure they can get. In fact, I think all but one of our current students did a sort of long multi-day visit last year, and ended up liking it so much that they came here. So I think visits are definitely the best, but obviously, depending on where you are, that could be somewhat difficult. So we're always happy to talk on the phone. We can set up a sort of Zoom with not only me, but the other faculty, to sort of give a more broad base for answering questions. And if there are sort of specific issues people have, like questions about application stuff, we always monitor the contact form on the website, so you'll get a response very quickly if you have a very specific direct question. But yeah, just in general, reach out to us, and we're very happy to work with whatever whatever people need to get the information that they want. And if they can visit, that's great. We highly encourage it. We love having company. So yeah, just reach out to us, and if you have questions, concerns, and we are more than happy to address them. And yeah, hopefully see you at some point for a visit.
That sounds great. Well, in our show notes for this episode, we'll have links to the Collegium website, as well as to the webinar and college fair presentations that I mentioned earlier, and a link to an episode of the Square Notes podcast on which Dr. Schaefer was a guest talking about some fascinating aspects of chant. We sure have enjoyed our time visiting with you, William, and thank you for coming to talk to us about the Collegium today. We wish you guys continued success as your school continues to grow, and a great rest of your school year.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this today. And yeah, hopefully I'll hear from some of your listeners, because I like to talk. So I'm always down for people contacting me.
Sounds good.
Subscribe to the Kolbe Cast on your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss an episode. And let us know how we're doing by leaving a rating or a review. And as always, feel free to email us at podcast@kolbe.org.
Mary our Mother, pray for us. St. Maximilian Kolbe, pray for us. Ad Majorem Dei Gloriam.